Welcome to Supercharged by AI, a podcast by AI Portland. I am Megan Notarte, co-founder of AI Portland and partner at Cloud4. I'm joined by Nicole Moores, my AI Portland co-founder and product design manager at Driveway. Since this is our first real podcast episode, I thought we would start by backing up a little bit and talking about what we're doing at AI Portland, how we got started, and then the real focus of this episode is talking about what we learned last night for those that can't come to our very cool events. Nicole, hey.
Hey.
We have told this story so many times, but can you, for our many podcast listeners, can you tell how we got started, what we're trying to do, why AI Portland?
Yes. So the story starts way back in December of last year. So Megan, you know this, but we're friends and former coworkers. And like all things in life that I am confused by, angst-ridden by, and genuinely just thinking about, I talk to you. So AI is one of those things. So all last year, pretty much since ChatGPT was released, Megan and I have been chatting about AI and sort of wondering what it means for us in our lives and our work and pondering the future and just trying to wrap our brains around it. Late December, something happened that usually doesn't happen because Megan and I both have busy lives. We happened to be hanging out at Megan's house, enjoying a glass of wine and specifically talking about AI. I think I listened to a podcast on the way over. I was really excited.
That's what it was. Sometimes I forget this part. Why, when we tell this story, it's like we're always talking about AI, which
I know.
is not true. But you had just listened to a podcast about design. Yeah.
Yes. It was talking about sort of interaction patterns, like users using AI and the interaction patterns. And as a product designer, I nerd out on that stuff. So I was super stoked and I was talking to you about it. And we realized that we're having these conversations and there probably were a lot of other people also having these conversations. And there really wasn't a space for people who aren't super techie building machine, learning models and there wasn't this spot for just exploration and play and curiosity, at least here in Portland. So I said to Megan, hey, we should start a group. We should start AI Portland. To which Megan said, no, we're not starting AI Portland.
No.
We do not need another thing. That is the worst idea I've ever heard. And I was like, we have everything we need to be able to do that between our two brains and passions and skill sets. Think about it. And the next day you reached out to me and was like, we should do that. We should start AI Portland. And, I think it just started as an idea to get people together to have conversations over the last 2 months. It's morphed a lot because we were right. Our hypothesis was right. There are people in Portland who also feel this way, who also identify as maybe, not super, super technical, but still wanting to know what AI is, what it means for them, and how they can best utilize it and think about it. I think we've discovered a lot along the way that a lot of people are afraid of AI, right?
Yeah.
So I think the ethos of our group is pretty clear. It's to create these sort of inclusive spaces for people to learn and explore, and for us to learn and invite people along for the journey with us. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's it. And I mean, the podcast is an extension of that. We're building community in Portland, Oregon, but there's so many people who are in that same place all over in all sorts of jobs. And so then there's really smart people in AI that are not in our area that we want to talk to because we want to understand more about what's happening. So that is how we got here. Today's episode, I'm kind of calling an after party because the party was last night. It's very early the next morning. And last night we had an event where the amazing Carrie Evans gave a presentation and a workshop about prompt writing. And it seems, I think, at first glance, like, okay, cool. Like, I can issue prompts to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, or someone mentioned character.ai, which I actually haven't had a chance to Google that one. But I learned so much about how I am underutilizing these tools
Same.
significantly. So let's talk about what we learned. Carrie was amazing, first of
She
all.
was. I don't know how someone could be so relatable and accessible, but also like so much information. And it was just so clear that she had tried literally everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When someone was like, have you encountered this? She was like, yes, as a matter of
Yes.
fact, I have. And here's
Yeah.
how I work around that, or here's what I do. She was
Yeah.
fantastic.
And we will link to this document in our show notes that was very comprehensive with some exercises on how she uses these GPT tools to like help get better outputs, basically.
Yeah.
So we'll link to that. And it's a lot. Like, it was a lot in the moment. I think I was looking at the screen like, oh man, like I kind of want to sit with this. So I'm glad that we have the thing. The first thing she walked us through was this like exercise in having ChatGPT generate the right prompt for you to give it to define your voice. Like, this one confused me a tiny bit. So was that how you understood that as well?
Yes, yes. And then she walked the group through how to save that. I think you talk to people all the time that are like, "Oh, I put something in a GPT and I got the garbage out and it sounded like a robot. And then when I asked it not to sound like a robot, then it sounded like a cowboy." You know what I mean? Like,
Or it's like mine is always overly enthusiastic. Like, it's always just like, yeah.
I mean,
Exclamation
Megan,
point. I mean, okay.
you that
Point taken. Point
uh
taken.
So I think, let's say you don't have any experience. I think it is likely that you may just stay in the same chat window and like have all the things you have tried in that window influencing what you're trying to get out. So even introducing the concept to some folks that you can save it, and that is like the world for that tone, that voice,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
And
could be news to somebody.
by save it, you mean, so like this exercise in particular is like, okay, get some examples of tone and style, give it to the prompt, and then ask ChatGPT to analyze it and give you back a paragraph that describes the tone and style and voice of all of that writing. And then the idea
Yes,
is that you take that, and when you generate prompts, you give it, this is the voice, and it's using that text that it generated. So it gives
yes,
you a more consistent voice, and you're not having to every single time, like, please use the style of blah, blah, blah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm an expert with 30 years experience, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
wonder, and I the jury is still out for me on this, but one of the things I tried to do was like create the custom GPT for my own self, and I've been mostly using that. It still is not perfect, right?
Mhm.
I feel like it's better and a little more matched to like how I talk, but I'm not 100% sure if I'm just really excited to play with a cool thing or if it's actually doing it. But there's a lot more that I could be telling it than what I have
Absolutely.
already told it.
Yeah,
And
you have to give
I
it
didn't even
more
know.
than just like your old posts,
Emails.
social posts and emails and stuff
That's
like that.
exactly what I did. I was like, here's all my own posts. I think also that made me think of the fact that, and you and I think wholeheartedly agree on this, but that you don't want these tools to just give you the perfect output and then you just use that. No
No.
matter what, human in the loop is really important. So the idea is like, let's get it quality stuff for you, the human, to
Yeah.
work with, and get it a little closer each time.
So, Megan, have you
Yes.
shared your Megan GPT with me? Because, I mean, God
No.
forbid anything happened to you. I sent you that article about the Lou
Yes.
Reed,
The chatbot or
where
whatever.
yeah, where
Yes.
saying I'll need access to that should anything happen to you so that I can have continue to have you as my thought partner.
That person. That's
Yeah.
adorable and hilarious. But that's the thing she talked about, right? Thought
Yeah.
person. Um,
Mhm.
can you talk more about that?
Well, I think, we've been to other events where there have been some themes and threads about really looking at AI as less as a you're going to give me a thing, an actual thing that I'm going to go off and use, and more of a collaborator. And I think Carrie really kind of doubled down on that concept. So much so, right? That like using AI to give you ideas and to work through problems and like to help you get to a certain thing, but not like give you the thing, you know?
Right. Yeah.
She uses AI so much so as a thought partner or a collaborator that she literally speaks to AI as if it were a
As a
human.
person.
Like,
Yeah.
say
What
more about that, and like, thank you and please.
I asked her in the session about that, right? I was like, "Do you really think you're getting better output by treating it like a person?" And of
Yeah,
course, she said yes, and then a person in the audience was like, "Well, the results of your prompt are then sort of filtered by like I want it to be kind, I want it to be human or whatever." So
yeah,
like in that way, it's helping. It's not a person, right? These are not this is not AGI. This is not your friend, but it certainly doesn't hurt you to be using those types of prompts and tone and whatever. The guy also said, I wish I remembered his name, so shout out to friend in the pink jacket. But he said that if you, in your prompt, you say that it's summer when this is being written, that it also provides higher quality responses or more positive responses because people tend to write more warmly, and like the content that was in the summer is like nicer was sort of my takeaway. Do you think I got that right?
I think that is exactly what he said. I also feel like the robots, like what the robots think about humans is so funny. You know what I mean?
Like we're depressed in the winter. I mean, they're not wrong.
They're not wrong. It's true. I mean, if you think about probably like, they're using the internet, you know what I mean? We're like on the internet being like, it's the heart of darkness. I'm so sad.
Right.
Yeah,
Like I mean all the content is like the public content on the internet. Exactly
exactly.
right. Yeah, which
Yeah.
for better or worse, not the best trove of human sentiments, not our finest content in history. I don't know.
Humanity on the internet, it's like so powerful and so wonderful. It has the potential to do such amazing
Yeah,
things and awful things.
right.
Awful.
We all know. You and I have ridden the internet ride from almost the very beginning. I also thought so Carrie gave us a prompt that ended up being like a training tool for a new PM. So the case study was you have a new project manager who doesn't know anything about like the types of assets and outputs you might need when you start a project. So, by using pretty sophisticated prompts, she created a tool for that PM to like tell the chatbot about the project. And then it would prompt the PM for questions, asking them about the project. And then I think prompting about the tools they might need, because I think it was specifically
Yeah.
around like project charters and work breakdown
Yeah.
structures and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And I think that kind of blew people's mind.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. I don't think, people look at it from that perspective, right? Where, like I said, I think a lot of people are just like, I'm going to be like, write me an email, and that's
I
where people sort of stop.
Yeah, I felt sophisticated because I was like, no, like its power is not in writing the email or the social post. Its power is in editing my
Mhm.
stuff, giving me feedback that I might get from a like, imaginary literary critic or something,
Right.
right? Or editor. And I thought, oh, I figured it out. And then when I saw this, I was like, oh man, I have never thought about it. I mean, one of the downsides to this is like that complex prompt she has to give to whoever is this hypothetical new PM. And then they
Mhm.
put it in ChatGPT. So like it's not automated, it's not wrapped, you know?
Right.
But
Well,
I think that's not what, like, I think it's possible to wrap it in some way, even if it was like
well,
a
you could
custom
create
code or,
yeah, you create your
yeah.
your own GPT for that, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's something to ask her. I don't really know if like that would drive just one of those custom GPTs or if you would need to do more.
I think, well, there's a whole suite of products right now that are
Yeah.
cropping up that do exactly that. They're just wrappers that write prompts for you,
Yeah.
right? And
100%.
like
Yeah.
they're just GUIs and they're very pointed. Like it's for content
Targeted. Yeah.
creation, for marketing. I've seen it like for software development, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But that's all they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. But, she doesn't need that wrapper. Like, yes, that seems very manual. Like, I'm going to give this like prompt or whatever, but it works for what she's trying to do. And one of the other points she made in this use case, like, someone said, like, well, so great. So you don't have to train the PM, like, you're not talking to them. And it was almost kind of like, womp womp. So you're taking away the human thing. But the point she made was, yeah, but sometimes when you're new to a job, it's really scary to ask very basic questions. And so having this allows the person to ask, I'm sorry, I don't know what a work breakdown structure is. And they may
Mhm.
not have felt comfortable asking that in another context. So,
Yeah.
like, it creates a safer space in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully people are also Googling, you know what I mean? But
Yes.
sometimes you
Yes.
don't even know what you don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. I think that's true too. You're right though. You could just Google work breakdown structure and then feel sad inside because it's hard and PM stuff. What else? What else came out for you?
I loved Carrie's gardening example where she was talking about how she wanted to start a flower garden but didn't even really know where to start. And she was able to create a spreadsheet that sort of categorized, different flowers based on if they were perennials, how big they were. She even put in there like, give me newbie mistakes.
That part was cool.
Yeah, she said it was, not 100% perfect, but definitely gave her a starting point. I thought that example was so great. The PM example, that may or may not be relatable to the everyday person, but this one
Yeah.
so was. And like the
Yeah.
way she was able to like engineer that, I thought was brilliant and just applicable to any person. You know what I mean? Myself
Yeah.
included. I have no idea
Yeah.
about gardening, yet I want to have one.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start. So
Right.
that was like I just thought that was so accessible and like super brilliant.
I'm really clear. I had a couple thoughts. The first thought was the design of these prompts to get you the output that you want requires a lot of critical and creative thinking. Like you said, she asked it to provide the mistakes that a new person might make when they're raising or planting these plants. You, as a human, have to think, okay, what would be helpful for me in order to design the prompt to give you what you want, which I think it's a really important thing when, especially for people who are scared of AI in a lot of ways. This is a great example of like, yes, it will do all this stuff for you, but like you really have to think about what you want. And yeah,
Totally.
the rote work of going and doing the research, which in the plant world, for what it's worth, I find completely overwhelming. I mean, you were mentioning this
Totally.
to me too, like
100%. Yeah.
going to the nursery and being like, I need new plants.
You
is
if you're like me, I'm just like, well, I like the way this one
That
looks
one
and I
looks
like the way
good.
that one looks. And then
Right.
it's a hot mess. They die because I don't know
Yeah.
how to take care of them.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So having that spreadsheet was pretty cool. People asked about hallucinations or errors in the output. And she said, of course, you have to kind of validate. But I mean, that's true of a lot of research that you do, right? When you're
Absolutely.
researching these things. So, yeah, don't take the spreadsheet and assume that everything in there is perfect, but it does give you now some direction to go and find out which ones work for your yard and your situation. Like it's filtered the list down for you, which I thought was pretty cool. The role playing examples I thought were cool too. And I think this might be more commonly known, especially in our job market. But the idea that you could and this wasn't her example, but it's one I've seen before. Like you could take a job description and put it in ChatGPT and then ask ChatGPT, what kinds of things would a hiring manager want to know based on this job description? Or prep your cover letter with the highlights of that job, have it like synthesize
Mm-hmm.
it and then summarize it for you. But then also like you're prepping for the interview. Maybe you give it some of that same information and then ask it what kind of questions that you might. And then when you give the response, ask it, was that a good response? Like that to me seems pretty powerful. And then you don't have to like burden your friends or something who are not going to do this very well.
No.
You know?
I think
Not
that just goes back to that human thought partner, collaborator concept.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and the I think the last thing I wrote down was that now you can talk to ChatGPT on your phone. So that was something, I don't know if that's new. I guess I just never really thought
Is
about
it?
it.
It's in the paid version. It's not in
I
the
have the
free
paid
version.
version. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I often do, for me, work out my ideas better when I'm talking, as you know, Nicole, rather than like, writing a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. And so it's interesting for me to think about being able to vomit out orally like a bunch of things that I'm thinking about and then ask it to summarize that for me in a more coherent way. I feel like that could really help with some of my Slack communication.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's like an assistant, right? Where you're just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you're verbally processing through things and then be like, "Hey, what when you get back to your desk, what are my action items?" That's like a true definition of an assistant.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people believe that this era of AI is kind of, that's where it's going to take us, that we will settle in this very robust personal assistant role. It's not going to be the everyone loses their jobs and we are like plugged into computers all the time or something.
I feel like all the whole thing last night made me feel even more confident. Like you said earlier, to be able to utilize these things well and get quality out, there's a lot of critical thought and thinking that goes into it. You know what I mean? So it's not just like, "Rah, rah, 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 rah." Well, you can't.
Yeah.
I'm doing a thing. No one will see it.
The keyboard thing that
The
I did
hands on the keyboard.
earlier. Imagine us
Imagine.
tapping
Yeah.
on a keyboard.
Yes, all that to say, it's not autopilot. You know what I mean? It takes a human, a person thinking about these things and utilizing them in coherent ways.
Yeah, that's a really great way of ending it. I did want to mention one other thing for folks who are, I just feel like we have to always say this, especially if you are brand new, like you are not in this space and you're really wanting to think about using a GPT or whatever to generate text and content, is never put in private information. I think one of the points that Carrie made last night was always assume that what you have is private and then make sure that what you're putting in is not sensitive.
Yeah,
And you should assume that it will show up somewhere on the internet. I think that's true of what you put on the internet right now, period. Right?
absolutely.
Like if you put something in a comment on Facebook, you should really assume that that could be seen by anyone. So don't be mean.
Anyone, anywhere, forever. That is the internet. If it goes
Yes.
on the internet, anyone, anywhere, forever. And AI is an extension of the internet. So
Yep.
assume the same rules
Yep.
apply.
So be careful, but also play around and learn these new ways. Like I had no idea prompts could be so long. I mean, I knew that the context window for prompts was much longer now, but I had never thought about how to generate these in such a structured way. So we'll put this document. So if you're listening, you can pull it up and play around with it. I think we have to say another special thanks to Carrie for the time that she took to put all of this together and share all of this with us, because I really learned a lot and I'm excited to try and integrate some of these tips into how I use it on the daily. Thank you again for listening to this episode of Supercharged by AI. Subscribe to get all the latest episodes and check us out at aipdx.info for more information.